Scooby-Doo vs. Courage the Cowardly Dog is, to be frank, a death battle that I didn't know I wanted so much until I had it. It's a match that had been on my radar for years before it became an episode, but it always tended to be more of a "this would be cool, but I'm not dying to see it" idea than anything else. Which, looking back on it, is kind of odd, because I grew up with both of these cartoon canines. I was a pretty dedicated Cartoon Network kid back when I watched a lot of cartoons. I have vague memories of watching Courage reruns and episodes of What's New Scooby-Doo on TV, and I also remember growing up with the Zombie Island and Monster of Mexico movies. Thus, I have plenty of history with and fondness for Scooby and Courage's source material, meaning that a death battle between them would likely be a very appealing one for me. And indeed it was, which again raises the question, why was I not more actively in favor of this? Well, I think it's really just down to the fact that I wouldn't have wanted to see either of them die. No matter how incredible a death battle production is, seeing a character you like bite the dust always stings, and sometimes that's enough to overrule any potential a death battle idea would have. But you probably know by now that Scooby vs. Courage manages to cross that bridge in a very particular way. So to lay the groundwork for how it does that, let's get to work breaking this episode down and appreciating the passion that went into making it. Scooby-Doo's analysis is really impressive simply for the fact that it condenses over 50 years of material into a palatable rundown. It's really well paced in the writing department, opening with Scooby's more grounded mysteries before jumping into the deep end with his supernatural adventures and zanier abilities. It feels like a natural evolution of SpongeBob's analysis from last year, with what a layman would assume to be a rather mundane character proving to be broken as hell when analyzed in a versus context. But this time, the analysis isn't structured around Wiz having a mental breakdown, so we get to fully revel in the insanity that a tune can bring to death battle. Case in point, the sheer volume of Scooby's universal feats. I only knew about the evil entity in the Zabrinsky Triangle before the episode came out, so I had the pleasure of being totally blindsided by him surviving all of time exploding in his face. I assume this also applies to everyone else in the panel, so that means Universal Captain Caveman. We fucking won, gamers. It's not just his feats though. Like I said, this analysis does an admirable job of breaking down just about everything Scooby can do, covering several of his many weapons, his Toon Force powers, and even his plot manipulation of all things. The dupe in particular had a fun explanation attached to it, with it standing out in my mind as a hallmark of Western cartoons that had yet to make an appearance on Death Battle. In fact, this whole analysis pretty much exemplified how much fun a tune with loads of history can be on the show. And the fact that it ends by throwing the Anunnaki out there with no further context is not only funny, but it shows just how much they needed to fit in Scooby's rundown that something like this ended up being a footnote. As far as death battle analyses are concerned, this one is nothing less than an instant classic. But then, what about a tune with not as much history to their name? Well, Courage's analysis proves that such a concept can be equally entertaining, because it's just as good as Scooby's, if not better. Although Courage's show is episodic in nature, this analysis manages to feel a lot more story-focused than Scoob's, making it a distinct viewing experience despite how similar their arsenals and abilities ended up being. I was so happy when I saw that they started the analysis off with the intro from the cartoon. It wasted no time in convincing me that this was going to be a love letter to him and the show, and everything that followed did not disappoint. I had a blast revisiting several of Courage's classic creeps and bad guys, and hearing about his feats and abilities was also fun, especially when it came to his shapeshifting. When even the black boxes are freaked out by a combatant's body horror, you know you're witnessing something to be remembered. Boomstick's note about anxiety in relation to Courage's perpetual underdog status was a pleasant and heartfelt surprise. Plus, his rant toward the end about how much of a shitbag Eustace is was both justified and very funny. But I think the best part of Courage's breakdown has to be how it wraps up, bringing up the Scooby-Doo crossover movie as a legitimate conclusion to Courage's story in a way that brings the whole analysis section full circle. It creates a really nice thread of commonality that ties everything together, something that only a scant few death battles can claim to do. And it helps that the ending line about Courage's name is just perfectly written in. Now, for an analysis segment that's all about Western cartoons, you'd expect it to have some pretty solid humor to set the mood, and indeed it does. The rundowns for Scooby and Courage had plenty of moments that made me laugh, whether it was the actual jokes from Wiz and Boomstick or visual gags in the editing. In particular, Scooby's cutaway gag tied in really nicely with their discussion of his disguises, while also bringing in Mama Boomstick for a surprise cameo that also sets up for a regular show clip on the monitor when Boomstick says, "Ma'am, ma'am." Definitely one of the standout cutaway gags for Season 10. Circling back to the editing though, let's all appreciate how great this episode was for Max to make his debut with. This was one of his most wanted episodes, and it shows with how well he did working with DJ to create two analyses that are a lot of fun to look at. They're not the flashiest we've seen this season, but I think some people misunderstand what a death battle edit needs in order to do its job. Motion graphics are great, of course, but what's much more important is that the footage matches what's being talked about and makes the act of watching the video enjoyable in its own right. And in those respects, I think Max and DJ did an enviable job with Scooby Courage. If I had to pick a favorite visual from each analysis, I'd have to go with the Zabriskie triangle calc and Courage being inside of a Bob Ross painting. And for a smaller detail that makes this episode feel even more special, renaming the feats panels to What He's Done for a Scooby Snack and The Things He's Done for Love in Scooby and Courage's rundowns respectively was an inspired choice. I also thought the royalty-free music choices were spot on in this episode. It's a pretty inconsequential thing to mention as a plus for Death Battle episodes, but I just thought the songs they picked to use here were super fitting for both characters, especially the ones they used for Courage. All of that praise is to say that I really liked the analysis portions in this episode. The fact that it's from a sect of pop culture I thoroughly enjoy and grew up with definitely plays a part in that, but that wouldn't be enough to carry the episode on its own. So it's a good thing that there are myriad elements for me to gas up, to the point where I might start to sound like a thesaurus of positivity. After all, there are only so many ways I can say I liked things about this episode, right? Well, you'll have to bear with me inventing more ways to do just that, because I haven't even gotten to the fight yet. But then again, do I really need to sing this fight's praises? Do I need to spell it out for you that this is one of Death Battle's crowning achievements as a show? No, of course I don't. You have more than 2 brain cells to rub together and a pair of eyes. But I'm afraid my review format demands I do it anyway, so I hope you'll stick with me as I spend the next several minutes pointing out the obvious by outlining every amazing part of this animation. Let's start with what's most self-evident here, the quality of the animation itself. This is the second ever fight to be given the privilege of being animated in Luis Cruz's hand-drawn style, and I say that honor couldn't have gone to a more deserving candidate. Every frame of this animation is incredibly fluid, wonderfully expressive, and impeccably drawn in general. And on top of that, the effects look amazing and the 3D haunted house background is jaw-dropping. This is nothing less than an achievement by Luis and his team, so I tip my hat to all of them for combining their efforts to create something as legendarily good as this. These incredible visuals are also brought to life with some god-tier voice acting. Billy is a lot of fun to listen to as Scooby. He has the laugh and the efforts down to a science. He also happens to voice another character in this fight, and he nails that mystery man's voice as well. Similarly, Edward Bosco blew me away as Courage, sounding so close to Marty Grabstein's official portrayal that I straight up thought they reused clips from the show at some points. And lastly, Liam's handful of lines as Computer were very well delivered, emulating the sardonic tone we know and love from the cartoon. All the people who lent their voices to this fight did a phenomenal job from start to finish. And last but not least, we have the track for this fight, and it's a banger and a half. Forever Terror Night takes a lot of inspiration from It's Terror Time Again, something that's readily apparent to anyone who has heard both songs. It's a super fitting choice, since it's one of the most iconic Scooby-Doo songs that isn't a theme song, and it lends itself quite well to a battle soundtrack. Theirwolf was able to make use of this and create a song that's intense, atmospheric, adaptable, and fun to listen to all at once. Other implementations like the original Scooby-Doo theme song being used at the start are also genius, but my favorite part of the track has to be the guitar solo during the Zabriskie triangle scene. But that's to say nothing of the vocals here, because Theirwolf's wife, chick named Dee, does an excellent job as well. She has a really nice singing voice and she captures the energy of Steve Isaacs on It's Terror Time Again with impressive accuracy. It all adds up to a song that's super fun to listen to, both on its own and in the fight. And with that, let's get to the action itself and appreciate everything going on here. This fight's setup is basically perfect. We open on Courage and Scooby stuck inside of a haunted house, calling out for Muriel and Shaggy as they back up into each other. As you'd expect, they're terrified upon making contact, but they actually recognize each other and laugh off the overreaction. This is so good. It's the first sign of their canonical friendship being worked into the battle, and I absolutely adore it. They're such good boys and must be protected. This wholesome reuniting of buddies is cut short by a giant 3D monster emerging from the hall behind them. Can I just say, right, the decision to keep this thing hidden during the sneak peek was such a good call. It made for a wild surprise during my first viewing, due in no small part to just how good it looks. Its spindly body and inhuman movements are perfect for making a super creepy threat, and its claymation-esque appearance is reminiscent of some Courage villains, something Luis had in mind according to the commentary track. And of course, its head being modeled after Eustace's iconic mask is just perfect. But what's even better than how the monster is designed is how it plays into the fight. Upon witnessing this abomination, Scooby and Courage do exactly what you'd expect them to: scream and run for their lives. The monster is hot on their heels though, and this is where the source of the animation's conflict becomes apparent. With both of them running scared, Scooby and Courage each start trying to get the other to go face their common enemy, something that rapidly gets out of hand as the battle picks up. Framing the conflict like this was a genius move by the writers, since it allows Scooby and Courage's friendship to shine while adhering to the need for them to fight each other. I legit have a bit of writer's envy toward whoever had the idea to write the fight like this, but this isn't the time or place for that. So anyway, this approach to the fight kicks off with Scooby trying to coax his beagle buddy into facing the threat, only for Courage to lose his composure and, in a panic, trip Scoob so the monster would stop to get him instead. This ploy works, and the monster raises a huge mallet over its head only for Scooby to scamper away in the nick of time. A mallet? Courage hustles into a large hearth only to find Scooby waiting for him, not at all pleased with the underhanded tactic he'd just been subjected to. And so the pups put up their paws, preparing to decide who will face the creature chasing them and declare a thumb war, despite not having opposable thumbs. Cartoon logic, baby. This is a very, very funny scene. Scooby and Courage chanting "not it" back and forth while their thumb war turns into an actual boxing match is just the kind of scene I wanted out of this matchup. And Scooby's thumb crying tears of joy upon its victory is just more of that, really. But he only won by playing dirty, using his tail to distract Courage during the round. So now that they've both done the other dirty, the floodgates are opened and we start getting into the real fighting. As the monster rips its mallet out of the floor and rushes forward, Courage digs a laser gun out of his pocket and fires on Scooby. The Greatest Dane manages to dodge for a bit before he gets hit in the nose, the blast torching his head and reducing it to ashes. Despite hitting Scooby presumably being his intent, Courage reacts to this with horror, thinking he might have actually killed his friend. But these fears are assuaged when Scooby reaches into his neck and pulls his head back out, good as new, which Courage is actually visibly relieved by. If I didn't make it clear already, the fact that Death Battle was able to make Scooby and Courage feel like friends in the middle of a fight to the death is just incredible. And small moments like this are how that dynamic gets across to the viewer. But there's still a fight to be fought, so Courage shoots another laser at Scooby that he deflects by using a nearby mirror. And Courage, insane creature that he is, rips himself in half so the laser passes through him. Between the gruesome view we see of his insides, the messy tear that divides his halves, and the low droning of his heartbeat underscoring the scene, there are so many things that make my skin crawl here. It's quintessentially Courage the Cowardly Dog in nature. Outlandish, gruesome, and still somehow comical. The laser flies past Courage as he puts himself back together, and it hits the monster in the knee by accident. This forces it to drop its mallet and let out the Wilhelm scream, which feels so right in a fight like this. In fact, that's another positive that can be heard throughout the animation. The sound design primarily uses classic Hanna-Barbera sound effects or adjacent noises, complementing the cartoony action. The monster's no Skyrim NPC though, and it shrugs off this attack to keep chasing Scooby and Courage, forcing them into a hall of doors that leads to the obligatory Scooby-Doo door gag. And they actually keep the gags coming, having Courage open the doors to see what's inside before slamming them shut and freaking out. We get some fun cameos here too, including Bad Mr. Frosty, Godzilla, and of course the requisite Columbo. I mean, Liam directed this episode, he was gonna be here somewhere. And since comedy comes in threes, this joke-focused segment of the fight caps off with Courage opening the door to find Scooby in disguise, having cloned himself and donned matching dresses. The way Billy delivers Scooby's line here sends me, and while you might think this comes out of nowhere, it actually doesn't. During the door chase gag, we can see him preparing the materials needed for this disguise, so it was being set up in a way that's easy to miss but enhances the viewing experience for those paying close attention. Courage doesn't fall for the disguise though. I mean, how could he? He's participated in a Scooby disguise before, and so he instead pulls out computer and tries to type in a question, digging his teeth into the floor to stay put as Scooby tries to drag him away. He even has to use his tongue to finish typing when Scooby finally gets the upper hand. I don't have any deep commentary on why this scene is so great, it's just pure fun and I'm so here for it. We get a great line from computer as it responds to Courage's inquiry, and I really like how Courage worded the question here. Like they say in the results, computer canonically doesn't know anything about Scooby-Doo, and Courage knows that. So he has to be purposefully broad in his question to get an answer about how to win. It's the kind of attention to detail that will get easy brownie points from me, so well done on that. Following this, we get what might be the scene that made me pop off the hardest in this whole thing. Scooby's twin selves stretch out Courage and perform the Zabrinsky Triangle, illuminating the universe to the point that its power cracks through the Death Battle Lab's monitor and blinds Wiz and Boomstick. This is a wildly creative adaptation of how the Zabrinsky Triangle shatters the universe's snow globe, and I absolutely love it. Whoever it was on the team that had the idea to do this, you're my goddamn hero. We cut back to the fight to see Courage laughing after being part of the dance. The room is charred from the brilliance of it all, and both Scooby and the monster, which happened upon them just as the triangle was taking effect, are nowhere to be seen. In fact, Scooby is bursting out of the front entrance, basically having used the Zabrinsky Triangle as a universe-sized flashbang. He scampers up to the mystery machine, happy to have escaped, only to look up as a shadow looms over him. Courage is lifting the God Bone with the dark matter meteor at Computer's suggestion, and he slams it down on Scoob in the van, making the latter explode in a shower of fire and Scooby snacks. This also sends the chest of demons flying into Courage, making him drop the meteor and sending it bouncing into the scattered boxes of treats. Honestly, this scene made my heart sink during my first watch. The chest of demons was made into a very obvious Chekhov's gun right here, and so for the rest of the fight, I was bracing myself for it to come back and kill Courage. That probably explains why I reacted so strongly to the actual end results, but we'll get there in due time. Courage desperately tries to dig the meteor out of the Scooby snacks, but he's stopped by a familiar yet ominous laugh. Scooby has been feasting on his eponymous treats this whole time, and as their power surges through him, he turns to look to the camera with the power of the 9 hells illuminating his eyes.
Scooby-Doo is a Dark Souls boss.
Scooby Demon.
In response to this, Courage name drops Chad in the classic "or my name isn't blank" gag from his show, and he bulks as Scooby starts growing to gargantuan sizes, gorging on more Scooby snacks and even the God Bone. This powers him up to the point that he becomes an Asura's Wrath boss, eclipsing the planet in size and throwing a colossal punch down at Courage. Courage initially looks afraid, but he summons his namesake, draws in a huge breath, and drowns out even the fight track as Edward Bosco flexes his lungs with a powerful scream that goes on for a full 9 seconds. I get weirdly hyped up by Courage's scream when I revisit this part of the fight. Is this what Dragon Ball fans feel like? Well, regardless, Courage's scream shatters Scooby's giant body, and as he ablates while falling back to Earth, he crashes into Courage like a falling meteor, creating a huge explosion that craters the front yard of the mansion. The music fades out for a bit here, which made me think one of them would be dead from the collision, but we see them swiping at one another with their paws as the dust clears, both exhausted from fighting. Their adrenaline doesn't stay gone for long though, as the monster reappears and scares them both. This drives Scooby to reach off-screen and pull over the chest of demons, opening it and unleashing its captive spirits to attack the monster in his stead. The ghostly hands reach over and pull off the monster's head, revealing Eustace Bag? Why, I should have known! And he would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for those meddling dogs and their portable 10th circle of hell. No, seriously, Eustace trips on the dark matter meteor as he tries to flee, and the chest of demons holds him down, shreds his face into cold cuts, and drags his soul into eternal torment before slamming shut again, sated by its new prisoner. Something interesting to note is that the kill on Eustace was a lot more brutal in the storyboards, basically having his whole body be torn to pieces rather than just his head. And despite John's note to go all out, I think the final version is the right amount of brutality for this scene. It's visceral and drawn out enough to be a satisfying end for an asshole like Eustace, but it keeps the messier stuff like blood and guts on a tight leash, so it's not a huge tonal whiplash going from a cartoony fight to a hyper-violent ending. Now, while watching this for the first time, I had thought Courage would try to save Eustace here, resulting in him also getting trapped and giving the win to Scooby. But when the chest slammed shut, the music switched to a happy ukulele, and Scooby and Courage shared a laugh before keeling over with fatigue, I was taken aback. I thought, there's no way, right? They couldn't have actually done it, right? Yeah, they did. This is the first legitimate draw in Death Battle history. The earlier ones don't really count, those are all cop-outs done for joke episodes. This blew me away, and I think it did the same for most people watching. Plenty of us wanted this to end in friendship, but how many of us actually thought that was a real possibility? I sure as hell didn't. But I'm so glad the research lined up to make this possible. Either one of these good boys dying would have been a terribly sad affair, so letting an abusive jerk take the formulaic fall instead, and letting the fighters laugh it off feels so much truer to their characters. It was basically the ideal way to end this fight, and I think the team executed that approach pretty much perfectly. And that's the fight for Scooby vs. Courage. I haven't spent as long talking about it as other animations from this season, but that's pretty much just because most of what I have to say is this is good / funny / cool / etc. I would have to get insultingly nitpicky to say anything bad about this fight. It might not be as groundbreaking as Bill vs. Discord, but I can confidently say that it is, in my opinion, the strongest showing Death Battle has ever put out. Luis might not have been drunk making this, but you'd have to be to not think this is an absolute masterpiece. Quickly going over the verdict, it's an interesting watch just to hear them break down how evenly matched the fighters were. Whiz and Boomstick's exchange over the latter's unbridled hatred of Eustace was fun, and the end puns are based because they work in Shih Tzus. My two dogs are Shih Tzus, so mentioning that breed is an easy way to make me do a smile. So yeah, Scooby-Doo vs. Courage continues Death Battle's hot streak pretty much effortlessly. The hard work and passion of everyone who worked on it is plain to see from start to finish, and I couldn't be happier that it got as much time in the oven as it did, because a matchup as special as this one deserves to be given every opportunity to shine. It is officially my new favorite episode of Death Battle, so of course it's a 10 out of 10, no question about it. This is one of the best Death Battles ever made, or my name isn't Nemesis Bloodryche, and it's not. And as for the next time, we have Rick versus the Doctor, which is a match I really wasn't expecting to see this year. The analysis previews and the sneak peek of the animation all have me pretty excited for this one. I'm looking forward to learning about the fighters while also being entertained by a uniquely eccentric battle. Now, before we wrap up the video, I was thinking about something special I could do for this review. See, I figured that since I hadn't been super outspoken in my support for this matchup prior to it becoming a death battle, I thought you all might like to hear from someone who was. So I enlisted my friend Ray, who has had this matchup as her most wanted for years now, to say a few words about what it means to her to have it happen. I'll be reading her message in her stead, so without further ado, for a whole lot of years now, this has been one of my all-time most wanted death battles, and I can't stress enough how overjoyed I've been about this actually being real these past 2 weeks. When I'm not in disbelief it actually is real, that is. I grew up in the 2000s as a Cartoon Network kid, which meant that for a whole lot of my childhood, Scooby-Doo and Courage were basically always there as CN played those two all the time. And without going into too much detail, I think both shows did a lot to influence me as a person, my humor, my identity, my interests, so on and so forth. I owe a lot of who I am now to these two series. It also probably helped I lived with dogs all my life, making for that easy relatability. And growing up, I always wanted them to meet because it just seemed so perfect in my head. Eventually we got that with the crossover movie and it was great, though before we ever got the confirmation of that, and well after it happened, I wanted it on Death Battle. It started out as a little bit of a joke. It just seemed like a funny idea to make into a bit to joke about with my friends. But over time, I really realized just how much love and passion I had for the idea and characters, and it grew from a little meme to something I was genuinely super passionate about and wanted to make a reality. I wanted to show my love and passion for these two to everyone, and eventually I was able to spread it to all my friends, and it went further and further and spread more and more into now. Every time it would come up in a discussion or in one of DB's casts or chats, I would always get that little bit of excitement like maybe, just maybe, I might actually get it. Actually seeing it on the next time though, I thought I had it in my head how I would feel and what I would think, but I was just super unable to process it even after all the messages I got. I've been looking back on Scooby-Doo and Courage a lot since then, both in research, as I was invited to the G1 blog even, and just to reinvigorate my love, and it really settled in again how much these two mean to me, but also just this whole suggestion and the fact it's happening at all. I'm definitely not the first person to say, oh, what if Scooby-Doo and Courage had a death battle? But seeing how far it's made it since I started joking about it and then actually wanting it, it almost feels like, in a way, I've made an impact on the show now. And like my lifelong attachment to these series, and following DB for 10 plus years now has actually been immortalized. It's a really special feeling that I don't know if I've ever had before. I just want to end off on saying that, like, never give up on something you have a lot of love or passion for. Eventually, that will all pay off. That's what I think. Thank you for letting me ramble about my silly dogs. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks again to Ray for contributing to this review. I'll be leaving a link to her Twitter in the description, so go give her a follow. She's cool and funny, you won't regret it. And with all that said, check out Biff's review of this episode to see our reaction highlights, and check out the other Death Battle content creators in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all again soon in the next video.
Well, good night, folks.